There are two types of parents in this world: those who plant gardens for their children to bloom in, and those who pull weeds to make themselves look taller. I was raised by the latter. The crystal chandelier above the dining table caught the candlelight like 1,000 judging eyes. It was my 18th birthday, and I should have been celebrating. Instead, I was learning the first lesson of what it meant to be a Preston. Love always comes with a price tag. A daughter is a gift you cultivate. My father, Arthur Preston, announced to the assembled guests, his voice carrying that theatrical boom he reserved for public moments. He raised his wine glass, the Bordeaux catching the light like liquid rubies. But a disobedient daughter is a weed that must be burned at the root. He clinked his glass against my mother's. Evelyn smiled, her perfectly painted lips curving with practiced grace. I sat frozen, my hands trembling beneath the white linen tablecloth, praying the mahogany floor would split open and swallow me whole. The guests, all carefully selected members of Savannah's elite, laughed politely, assuming it was one of Arthur's famous jokes. But I saw the steel in his eyes. I knew what was coming next. "Clara, sweetheart," he continued, reaching into his breast pocket. "Your mother and I have decided to invest in your future. We're sending you to the Savannah College of Art and Design, your dream school." My heart leapt. For one moment, one crystalline moment, I thought maybe I'd been wrong about them. Maybe they did love me. "However," Arthur said, and the word landed like a guillotine blade, "education is an investment, not a gift. You'll be signing this development contract tonight. Every penny we spend on your tuition, room, and board will be recorded as a loan at 8% annual interest, compounded monthly. We expect full repayment within 5 years of graduation." He slid the document across the table. I stared at it, the words blurring through tears I refused to let fall. My mother leaned in, her perfume, Chanel No. 5, always Chanel No. 5, overwhelming my senses. "Darling, most girls would be grateful. You're so lucky we're willing to invest in you at all. Sign it and smile. People are watching." I signed it. I smiled. And in that moment, at 18 years old, I learned that in the Preston household, love was just another form of debt collection. My name is Clara Preston, or at least it was. This is the story of how I burned down a dynasty built on lies, forgery, and the systematic destruction of the only person who ever had the right to carry that name, me. 6 years passed. 6 years of working 3 jobs while maintaining a perfect GPA. 6 years of sending half my meager paychecks to something my parents called the family fund. 6 years of living in a basement apartment that smelled of mildew and broken dreams, an apartment my parents owned and charged me double the market rate to rent. It's a life lesson, my mother had explained when I questioned the price. In the real world, landlords don't give discounts just because you're family. I was 24 years old, and I had never been on a real vacation. I'd never owned anything that didn't come from a thrift store. My luxury items consisted of a 10-year-old bicycle with a rusted chain and a laptop I bought refurbished in 2019. But I had finally done it. I'd saved $23,000, enough for first and last month's rent on a real apartment in Chicago, where I'd been offered a position at a prestigious design firm. Enough to start over. Enough to be free. I chose a Tuesday to tell them. Tuesdays were my father's good days. The days when the shipping company's numbers looked promising, when he'd already had his afternoon scotch, but hadn't moved on to the evening bottle yet. I found them in the library of the Preston Manor, a Gothic revival monstrosity that had been in my grandfather's family for 3 generations. My father sat behind his mahogany desk, reviewing ledgers. My mother perched on the leather settee, doing needlepoint, an affectation she'd adopted because ladies of breeding always have a handicraft. "I have some news," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I've been offered a position at Morrison and Hall in Chicago. It's a lead designer role. The salary it's life-changing. I'll be able to pay back the education loan within 2 years. I had expected surprise, perhaps even pride. Instead, my father's face transformed, the color rising from his collar to his hairline until he resembled an overripe tomato on the verge of explosion. You think you can just leave? His voice was dangerously quiet. You think you can take all that education I bought you, all those connections I provided, and just give them to someone else? Arthur, calm down, my mother said, but there was no real concern in her voice. She set down her needlepoint with deliberate precision. Clara, sweetie, sit down. Let's discuss this rationally. I should have run, but I sat. You owe us, Clara, my father continued, his voice gaining strength. And I'm not just talking about the education loan. I'm talking about the cost of raising you, the food, the clothes, the electricity for that nightlight you needed until you were 12 years old, the therapy sessions after you had those ridiculous nightmares about being trapped in boxes. He opened a drawer and pulled out a file folder, thick with documents. He threw it on the desk between us. I've been keeping records, he said, itemized, every single expense from the day you were born until the day you turned 18. Your upbringing costs total $167,000. Add that to your education loan, now at $93,000 with accrued interest, and you owe this family $260,000. I stared at the folder. My hands started shaking. That's not legal, I whispered. You can't charge your child for being born. No. My mother smiled, and it was the smile of a shark who'd spotted blood in the water. Then I suppose you'll need to hire a lawyer to argue that point. But lawyers are expensive, Clara, much more expensive than simply paying what you owe and fulfilling your obligations to this family. What obligations? I asked. My father leaned back in his chair, his face settling into an expression I'd seen 1,000 times, the look of a man who held all the cards and knew it. You're going to continue working at Preston Shipping and Logistics. You're going to take the role of managing director. On paper, of course. You'll sign the documents we need signed, attend the meetings we need attended, and represent this company in all official capacities. In exchange, we'll forgive $50,000 of your debt. The rest you'll pay off over time. But I don't know anything about shipping logistics. I protested. You don't need to know anything, my mother said, returning to her needlepoint. You just need to sign your name and look pretty at corporate events. It's really quite simple. That night, I lay awake in my basement apartment, water dripping somewhere in the darkness, and tried to understand how my life had become a trap I built with my own hands. I signed the papers. I became managing director of Preston Shipping and Logistics. I signed documents I didn't read, attended meetings I didn't understand, and smiled at corporate events where people congratulated me on my family legacy. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was being smart, strategic. I would pay off the debt, and then I'd leave. I didn't realize I was signing away my freedom, my future, and nearly my life. The process server found me on a Wednesday morning, 3 months after I'd taken the Chicago job anyway. I'd made the decision to run. Consequences be damned. I'd packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases, sublet a studio apartment in Lincoln Park, and blocked my parents' numbers. For 6 weeks, I'd been happy. For 6 weeks, I'd been Clara the designer, not Clara the debtor. I'd gone to work, grabbed coffee with colleagues, and fallen asleep without the weight of obligation crushing my chest. And then came the knock on the door. Clara Preston? The man was young, apologetic. I'm sorry to inform you that you're being served with a lawsuit. You're required to appear in Chatham County Court in Savannah, Georgia, on November 3rd. My hands shook as I took the papers. I closed the door, slid down against it, and read, Preston v. Preston. The plaintiffs, Arthur and Evelyn Preston, are seeking damages in the amount of $600,000 for systematic theft, embezzlement, and fraud committed by the defendant, Clara Preston, during her tenure as managing director of Preston Shipping and Logistics. $600,000. The number swam before my eyes. I'd never seen that much money in my entire life. How could they claim I'd stolen it? I kept reading, and with each paragraph, the noose tightened. According to the lawsuit, I had authorized the transfer of company funds to personal offshore accounts, used company credit cards for personal expenses totaling $340,000, purchased luxury vehicles and property using company assets, systematically embezzled funds during my 18-month tenure as managing director. There were photographs, a Porsche registered in my name, receipts from designer boutiques, images of me on a yacht in the Mediterranean. None of it was real. None of it was me. But it looked real. It looked damning. And according to the documents, all of it was supported by my signature on financial authorization forms, transfer requests, and corporate resolutions. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother, the first communication I'd received since I'd blocked them. It's for your own good, sweetie. You need to learn humility. Come home, pay what you owe, and we'll make this go away. Otherwise, well, federal prison has excellent character-building programs. Love, Mother. I threw my phone across the room and watched it shatter against the wall. That's when I understood. They weren't just suing me for money I didn't have. They were framing me for crimes I didn't commit. They were making me the scapegoat for something much bigger than a family dispute. I spent that night on my laptop searching through every document I'd ever signed for Preston Shipping and Logistics. And slowly, horribly, the picture emerged. The company was broke. Had been for years. My father had been running an elaborate shell game, moving money through offshore accounts to hide losses from investors and evade taxes. And every single document authorizing those transfers bore my forged signature. If I lost this case, I wouldn't just be bankrupt. I'd be going to federal prison for tax evasion, fraud, and embezzlement. My parents weren't just trying to collect a debt. They were sacrificing me to save themselves. The Chatham County Courthouse smelled of old wood and older secrets. I stood in the defendant's gallery, wearing the only suit I owned, a black number from Goodwill with a small stain on the left cuff I'd tried to hide with a careful fold. Across the aisle, my parents sat behind their attorney, Harrison Sterling, a man who looked like he ate opposing counsel for breakfast and picked his teeth with their bones. His suit probably cost more than I'd earned in the last 6 months. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, the picture of maternal heartbreak. My father sat with his arms crossed, his expression a mixture of righteous anger and smug satisfaction. Behind them, the gallery was packed, members of Savannah's society elite, all eager to watch the Preston family drama unfold. The local paper had picked up the story, Savannah heiress accused of defrauding her own parents. I wasn't an heiress. I was a graphic designer who took the bus. But perception, I was learning, mattered more than truth. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Halloway. The bailiff announced. Judge Halloway entered, a woman in her late 50s with silver hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes that looked like they could see through walls. She had a reputation in legal circles as the Hammer, fair but merciless and utterly intolerant of nonsense. My public defender, Marcus Chin, leaned over and whispered, "That's good for us. She doesn't like rich people trying to bully their way through her courtroom. And she doesn't like people who steal from their parents." I whispered back, "We're not exactly starting from a position of strength." The gavel came down. The trial began. Harrison Sterling was a master. Over the next 3 days, he painted a picture of Clara Preston that I barely recognized. A spoiled, entitled brat who'd been given every advantage and had repaid her parents' generosity with theft and deception. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, Sterling's voice boomed, echoing off the marble walls. We are here today because of a betrayal so profound, so calculated, that it defies comprehension. The Prestons gave their daughter everything: a prestigious education, a position in the family business, a path to success. And how did Clara Preston repay them? He clicked a button, and the courtroom screen lit up with an image of a sleek black Porsche 911. This vehicle, valued at $112,000, was purchased using funds from Preston Shipping and Logistics. It's registered in Clara Preston's name. The purchase was authorized by Clara Preston's signature. Click. Next image. A receipt from Saks Fifth Avenue for $18,000. Designer clothes, shoes, handbags, all purchased on the company credit card. All authorized by the defendant. Click. Next image. A photograph of a woman who looked vaguely like me, standing on the deck of a yacht, champagne glass in hand, wearing a bikini I would never have the confidence to wear in public. This photograph was taken last summer during a Mediterranean cruise. The yacht rental cost the company $47,000. Who authorized that expense? He turned to face me, his finger pointing like an accusation from God himself. Clara Preston. I sat there, numb, watching him dismantle my life with lies rendered in high-definition clarity. Marcus objected when he could, but Sterling had documents for everything. Paper trails, digital records, signatures, my signature. On the third day, Sterling called my parents to the stand. My mother went first, dressed in a modest gray suit that made her look like a mourning widow. She dabbed at her eyes as Sterling gently guided her through her testimony. Mrs. Preston, can you describe your relationship with your daughter? I love Clara more than anything in this world, my mother said, her voice breaking. From the day she was born, I've tried to give her every advantage, every opportunity. I thought we were close. When did you first suspect something was wrong? About a year ago. Arthur noticed discrepancies in the company accounts. At first, we thought it was just bookkeeping errors. But then we started seeing charges we didn't recognize. When we investigated, we discovered that Clara had been systematically moving money into offshore accounts we knew nothing about. Did you confront her? We tried. My mother sobbed. But she just became angry. She said we were trying to control her, that she was an adult and could do what she wanted. And then she disappeared. She ran away to Chicago, and we realized she'd taken even more money with her. It was a masterful performance. By the time Sterling finished, half the gallery was crying along with my mother. Then came my father. Arthur Preston took the stand like a man ascending a throne, spine straight, jaw set, radiating the wounded dignity of a patriarch betrayed by his own blood. Mr. Preston, Sterling began, you built Preston Shipping and Logistics from the ground up, correct? I did. My father, Clara's grandfather, left me a small inheritance and a name. I turned that into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. It wasn't easy. I worked 18-hour days, sacrificed time with my family, missed birthdays and holidays. But I did it because I wanted to build something I could pass on to my children. And you brought Clara into the business? I did. Despite her lack of interest in logistics, despite her artistic temperament, I believed in her. I thought if I gave her responsibility, she'd rise to the occasion. I thought I was preparing her to eventually take over the company. When did you realize you'd made a mistake? My father's jaw tightened. For a moment, I saw something flicker across his face. Was it guilt? Shame? But then it was gone, replaced by righteous anger. When our accountant informed me that $600,000 was missing from our operating accounts. When I discovered that my daughter, my own flesh and blood, had been forging additional signatures, creating fake invoices, and systematically bleeding the company dry, how did this betrayal affect you? My father looked directly at me. It broke my heart. I raised a thief. I raised a daughter who valued money more than family, more than loyalty, more than love. The gallery murmured. I could feel their judgment, like a physical weight. Marcus leaned over. Clara, we need something. Anything. Do you have any proof that these documents are forged? I thought about the one thing my parents had forgotten, the one piece of evidence they'd overlooked in their meticulous frame job. I need to get something from my childhood home, I whispered. From my old bedroom. They'll never let you in. They don't have to let me in. I still have my key. That night, I broke into the Preston Manor. Technically, it wasn't breaking in. I still had the key from my 18th birthday, the one my mother had given me with the caveat that this is your home, but remember, we're your landlords now. The house was dark. My parents were staying at their vacation property in Tybee Island for the duration of the trial, probably to avoid reporters and the judgment of their society friends. I slipped inside, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I crept up the curved staircase, past the gallery of Preston family portraits, generations of stern-faced men and women who all seemed to be looking down at me with disappointment. My old bedroom was exactly as I'd left it the day I moved out. The single bed with its faded quilt, the small desk where I'd done homework by lamplight because my father said I didn't need overhead lighting to do simple schoolwork. I knelt by the far corner, near the window. There, hidden beneath an old rug I'd bought at a thrift store with babysitting money, was the loose floorboard. I pried it up with shaking fingers. Inside the hollow space were the remnants of my childhood. Diary entries, old drawings, and most importantly, the iPad my father had thrown away 5 years ago, claiming it was broken beyond repair. It wasn't broken, just a dead battery and a cracked screen. I'd fished it out of the trash, charged it, and hidden it here because even then, some part of me knew I might need evidence someday. My father had never logged out of his cloud storage. I sat on my old bed, the iPad glowing in the darkness, and started scrolling through 5 years of photographs, documents, and text messages. And there it was, all of it. Photographs of my mother at the dining room table, a light box in front of her, carefully tracing my signature from my high school diploma onto contract after contract, screenshots of text messages between my father and his accountant. The offshore accounts are set up. I'll have Evelyn forge Clara's signature on the transfer authorizations. If the IRS comes sniffing, they'll find her name on everything. The girl's too naive to check the corporate filings. What if she figures it out? She won't. And even if she does, who's going to believe her over us? We're the Prestons. She's just a confused art student with delusions of independence. There were emails to Harrison Sterling sent months before they'd served me. Harrison, we need to move quickly on the Clara situation. The IRS investigation is heating up, and we need a scapegoat in place before they start connecting dots. Can you draft lawsuit paperwork that makes it look like we're the victims? Spare no expense. This is about protecting the Preston legacy. I sat there in the darkness, tears streaming down my face, not from sadness, but from rage. Pure, crystalline rage. They hadn't just betrayed me. They'd been planning this for years. I had never been their daughter. I'd been their insurance policy. I copied everything to a flash drive. And then I did something I'd been too afraid to do my entire life. I started to fight back. The defense calls Clara Preston to the stand. The courtroom fell silent. I stood, smoothed my thrift store suit, and walked to the witness box. My hands were steady. My voice, when I spoke, was clear. Marcus approached. his expression calm, but his eyes bright with the knowledge of what we were about to do. "Miss Preston, would you say you have a good relationship with your parents?" "No," I said simply. "I would say I have a parasitic relationship with my parents. They're the parasites." The gallery gasped. Sterling shot to his feet. "Objection! Your Honor, the defendant is clearly—" "Overruled," Judge Holloway said, leaning forward with interest. "I'll allow it. Continue, Miss Preston." "My parents have spent my entire life convincing me that I owed them for my existence," I said, looking directly at the judge. "They charged me for my upbringing. They turned my education into a loan with interest. They forced me to sign documents I didn't understand for a company role I never actually performed. And when I finally tried to leave, they framed me for crimes they committed." "That's a serious accusation," Marcus said. "Can you prove it?" I pulled the flash drive from my pocket. "I can prove all of it." Sterling jumped up. "Objection! Where did this evidence come from?" "This is—" "Your Honor," I said, cutting him off, "this flash drive contains data from my father's personal iPad, a device he threw away, and that I recovered from the trash 5 years ago, as the supposed managing director of Preston Shipping and Logistics. I believe I have every legal right to access company devices and company records, even if they were stored on personal equipment used for business purposes." Judge Holloway's eyes narrowed. "Approach the bench. All of you." We huddled at the judge's bench while she examined the flash drive, plugging it into her computer. Her expression grew darker with each file she opened. "Mr. Sterling," she said finally, "are your clients aware of the contents of this drive?" Sterling had gone pale. "Your Honor, I had no knowledge of this evidence. If there's been any impropriety on my client's part—" "Impropriety?" Judge Holloway's voice could have frozen fire. "This is a photograph of Mrs. Preston forging her daughter's signature. This is a text message explicitly stating their intention to frame Ms. Preston for tax evasion. This is conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, and obstruction of justice." She turned to me. "Ms. Preston, why didn't you present this evidence sooner?" This was the moment when I either played it safe or went for the throat. "Because, Your Honor, I wanted them to testify under oath first. I wanted the world to hear them call me a thief. I wanted them to commit perjury in front of all these people who've spent years admiring them. I wanted to give them enough rope to hang themselves." Judge Holloway stared at me for a long moment. Then, incredibly, a small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Bailiff," she said, returning to her seat, "please ensure that Mr. and Mrs. Preston do not leave this courtroom." My father stood up, his face purple with rage. "This is absurd. That evidence is clearly fabricated. Clara is a graphic designer. She could have photoshopped all of it." "Sit down," Judge Holloway commanded. "We'll have the metadata verified immediately. Court is in recess for 30 minutes. Those 30 minutes felt like 30 hours. I sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, Marcus beside me, neither of us speaking. My hands shook. My heart raced. What if I'd missed something? What if they'd somehow covered their tracks better than I thought? What if— "All rise." We filed back in. Judge Holloway's expression was carved from granite. "The metadata has been verified by our forensic specialist," she announced. "The photographs and documents on this drive are authentic, unaltered, and were created on the dates indicated. Furthermore, our specialist has examined the signatures on the documents in the Preston versus Preston case, and they show clear evidence of forgery, specifically evidence of lightbox tracing from the defendant's high school diploma." The courtroom erupted. My mother let out a sound like a wounded animal. My father lunged toward the defense table, but 2 bailiffs grabbed him. "The lawsuit of Preston versus Preston is dismissed with prejudice," Judge Holloway continued, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Furthermore, I am ordering an immediate freeze on all assets belonging to Arthur and Evelyn Preston pending investigation by the District Attorney's Office. Mr. and Mrs. Preston, you are hereby ordered to remain in this county and surrender your passports. Failure to comply will result in immediate arrest. She turned to me, and for the first time, her expression softened. Miss Preston, I want to ask you one question, and I want you to answer honestly. Yes, Your Honor. Did your parents ever love you, or were you always just a means to an end? The courtroom fell silent. Every eye was on me. My mother was crying. My father looked like he wanted to kill me. I thought about that question. Really thought about it. I don't know, Your Honor, I said finally, but I do know that if they ever did love me, it wasn't enough to stop them from trying to destroy me. And that's not really love at all, is it? Judge Holloway nodded slowly. No, Miss Preston, it isn't. She slammed her gavel down. This court is adjourned. The district attorney moved fast. Within 48 hours, Arthur and Evelyn Preston were arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, forgery, tax evasion, obstruction of justice, perjury, witness tampering. Harrison Sterling dropped them as clients the moment the handcuffs clicked shut. Without his expensive expertise, they were assigned a public defender, a tired-looking man who seemed overwhelmed before he even opened their case file. The bail hearing was set for the following Monday. I sat in the front row, wearing one of the designer outfits they claimed I bought with stolen money, items I'd actually purchased at an estate sale for $30. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to understand that I wasn't afraid anymore. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Angela Morrison, laid out the case with brutal efficiency. The evidence was overwhelming. The financial trail was clear. The forgeries were undeniable. Your Honor, she concluded, the state requests that bail be set at $500,000 each. The defendants have significant means to flee the country and have demonstrated a willingness to engage in elaborate fraud to avoid consequences for their actions. My father's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, my clients are respected members of this community with deep roots here. They're not flight risks. We request bail be set at $50,000. Judge Holloway, bless her, wasn't having it. Respected members of the community don't frame their own daughters for federal crimes. She said dryly, bail is set at $500,000 each. Cash only, no bond. My parents didn't have it. The asset freeze meant they couldn't access their accounts. The Preston Manor, their pride and joy, would have to be used as collateral, but even that couldn't be liquidated fast enough. They were remanded to the Chatham County Detention Center. As the bailiffs led them away, my mother grabbed my arm. Clara, baby, please. You can't let them do this to us. We're family. Tell them this is all a misunderstanding. I looked at her hand on my arm, the same hand that had pulled my braids too tight, that had forged my signature, that had tried to send me to prison. I pulled away. No, Evelyn, I said, using her first name for the first time in my life. We're not family. We're business partners. And as you always taught me, the contract is final. I walked out of that courthouse into the bright Georgia sunshine. For the first time in 24 years, I could breathe. But I wasn't done. Not even close. 3 weeks after the bail hearing, I received a certified letter from a law firm in London. Inside was a document that would change everything. Dear Ms. Preston, we are writing to inform you that you have been named as the primary beneficiary of the Eleanor Preston Memorial Trust. Your grandmother, Eleanor Marie Preston, established this trust in 1989 with explicit instructions that it was to remain sealed until certain conditions were met. Those conditions are as follows. 1. The beneficiary must be a direct descendant of Eleanor Preston II. The beneficiary must be at least 21 years of age. 3. The beneficiary must provide proof of their identity through DNA testing. 4. The beneficiary must be free from any criminal conviction or pending criminal charges as of your 24th birthday and your recent exoneration in the Preston versus Preston case. All conditions have been met. I stared at the letter, my hands shaking. There was more. The trust contains the following assets: the deed to the Preston family estate, originally purchased by your great-great-grandfather in 1887, a collection of European antiquities valued at approximately £8.2 million, stock holdings and bonds valued at approximately $4.7 million, a sealed letter from Eleanor Preston, to be opened only by the beneficiary. I sat down hard on my apartment floor. My grandmother, the soft, kind woman who smelled of lavender and always saved me the biggest slice of pie, had left me everything. The Preston Manor wasn't my father's. It had never been his. He'd been living in my house, spending my money, building his empire on my inheritance. And he'd known. That's why he'd been so desperate to control me. That's why he'd tried to frame me. If I went to prison, if I died, if I simply disappeared, the trust would default to him as the surviving Preston heir. I was never his daughter. I was his obstacle. The DNA test took 2 weeks. I provided hair samples, saliva, everything they needed. And when the results came back, they came with another letter, this one handwritten, yellowed with age, sealed with red wax. My dearest Clara, if you're reading this, then I am gone, and you have grown into a woman. I hope you have been loved. I hope you have been cherished. But knowing my son Arthur, I suspect you have been used instead. I must tell you a truth that I took to my grave, a truth I documented only in sealed letters to be opened after both Arthur and I had passed from this world. Arthur is not my biological son. He was the child of my sister, Patricia, who died in childbirth in 1963. My husband and I adopted him, raised him as our own, and gave him the Preston name. We loved him. Oh, how we tried to love him. But Arthur was never content with love. He wanted ownership. He wanted control. When my husband died and left the estate to me, Arthur contested the will. He forged documents claiming he was my biological heir. He tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. When that failed, he simply waited. I changed my will the day you were born, Clara. I saw you, this perfect, tiny thing with your father's selfishness in your eyes, and I made a decision. You would be the true heir. You would be the one to carry on the Preston name with honor. The estate is yours. The money is yours. And the truth is yours to do with as you wish. I don't know what Arthur has done to you by the time you read this, but I know it has been terrible. He has a way of making people feel small, of making them believe they deserve the cruelty he inflicts. You don't deserve it, my darling girl. You never did. Be the forest, not the weed. Burn it all down if you must, but make something beautiful in the ashes. All my love, your grandmother Eleanor. I sat on the floor of my Chicago apartment and sobbed, not from grief, but from relief. Someone had seen me. Someone had loved me. Someone had left me a way out. No, not a way out. A way forward. I hired the best real estate lawyer in Savannah, a woman named Rebecca Moss who had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in property disputes. I showed her the trust documents, the DNA results, and my grandmother's letter. This is ironclad, she said, her eyes gleaming. The estate is yours. Has been since you turned 21. Your father has been essentially squatting in your house for the last 3 years. Can we evict him? Honey, we can do more than evict him. We can sue him for back rent, property damage, and unauthorized use of trust assets. But here's the beautiful part. Your father used the Preston Manor as collateral for his bail bond. If he loses the house, he loses his bail. He goes straight back to jail pending trial. I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. How fast can we move? I can have the eviction notice filed by end of business today. Sheriff's Department can serve it tomorrow. Georgia law gives them 72 hours to vacate. Do it. Friday morning arrived cold and clear. I stood across the street from the Preston Manor, watching as two sheriff's deputies walked up the curved stone pathway. Behind them, a locksmith waited with his tools. Rebecca stood beside me, a tablet in her hand showing the live stream from her paralegal's phone. You sure you want to watch this? I need to, I said. The deputies knocked. Once, twice, 3 times. The door opened. My mother stood there in a silk robe, a glass of gin already in her hand despite the early hour. Her hair was unwashed, her face puffy. 3 weeks in jail followed by house arrest had not been kind to Evelyn Preston. What is this? She demanded, her voice shrill. Do you know who we are? Ma'am, I have an eviction notice signed by Judge Patricia Halloway, the deputy said, his voice professionally neutral. This property has been deemed to belong to the Eleanor Preston Memorial Trust, with Clara Marie Preston as the sole beneficiary and trustee. You and Mr. Arthur Preston have 72 hours to vacate the premises. That period expired at midnight last night. That's impossible. This is our house. We've lived here for 30 years. The deputy handed her the paperwork. According to the deed filed with the county in 1887 and the trust documents executed in 1989, this property belongs to the trust. You've been residing here illegally. My father appeared behind her, looking disheveled in wrinkled pajamas. His face, when he saw the deputies, went from confusion to rage to something that looked almost like fear. You can't do this, he said. We have rights. We have. You have 1 hour to collect personal belongings, the deputy interrupted. Clothing, personal items, medication. Everything else remains as property of the estate. If you refuse to leave voluntarily, you will be removed by force and charged with trespassing. My mother's face crumpled. Clara, she whispered, looking around wildly. Clara, I know you're behind this. Please, baby, we can talk about this. We're family. I stepped out from behind the oak tree where I'd been watching. My mother's eyes locked on mine. Hello, Evelyn, I said, my voice carrying across the morning air. You have 59 minutes. I'd suggest you start packing. My father charged toward me, but the deputies intercepted him. Sir, you need to step back right now, or you'll be arrested for violating your bail conditions. You vindictive little bitch, he screamed. I raised you. I clothed you. I fed you. No, I said calmly. You raised me as an investment. You clothed me as a tax deduction. You fed me and sent me itemized bills. And now, Arthur, I'm foreclosing on the loan. This is my house. Actually, Rebecca said, stepping forward and handing him a document, this is a bill for back rent. According to our calculations, you've been residing in Clara's property without permission for 3 years. At fair market value for a property of this size, that's approximately $3,600 per month, plus utilities, maintenance costs, and unauthorized alterations to the property. The total comes to $147,000. We'll expect payment within 30 days, or we'll be forced to pursue collection through the courts. My father's face turned a shade of purple I'd never seen before. For a moment, I thought he might have a stroke right there on the lawn. You're going to regret this, Clara, he hissed. Mark my words. You're going to regret this for the rest of your miserable life. No, Arthur, I said, I don't think I will. 58 minutes later, my parents stood on the sidewalk with 4 garbage bags of belongings. No furniture. No art, no valuables, just clothes, toiletries, and my mother's needlepoint basket. The locksmith changed the locks while they watched. The deputies stood by to ensure they didn't try to force their way back in. And the neighbors, oh, the neighbors. Every single house on Preston Avenue had someone on their porch or peering through windows. Phones were out, recording everything. The pillars of the community were being evicted from their own home like common deadbeats. Mrs. Hadsworth from 3 doors down actually applauded. My mother saw her. Patricia, please, you have to help us. We've been friends for 20 years. Mrs. Hadsworth stopped clapping. Evelyn, you tried to frame your own daughter for federal crimes. You're no friend of mine. She went back inside and closed the door. One by one, the neighbors disappeared. No one offered help. No one offered shelter. The Prestons had spent 30 years lording their wealth and status over everyone. Now, when they needed compassion, they found only locked doors and drawn curtains. Where are we supposed to go? My mother sobbed. I've arranged temporary housing for you. I said. I handed her a piece of paper with an address. It's a basement apartment. Small but clean. The rent is $1,200 a month, well below market rate. I'll cover the first month as a courtesy. After that, you're on your own. My father looked at the address. His face went white. This is the apartment where you made Clara live. Yes, I said. I bought the building 6 months ago. I thought you might appreciate the symmetry. Consider it a chance to build character. I hear adversity is excellent for personal growth. I turned to leave, but my mother grabbed my arm. Her nails dug into my skin. How can you do this to us? She whispered. We're your parents. We gave you life. I looked at her hand on my arm, then up at her face, the face that had smiled while forging my signature, that had testified under oath that I was a thief, that had sent me a text message suggesting I benefit from prison's character-building programs. You gave me life, I said quietly, and then you spent 24 years trying to take it back. Now, I'm returning the favor. Enjoy your new home, Evelyn. I made sure to leave the mold in the bathroom. Builds character. I pulled free and walked to my car. I didn't look back. The criminal trial of Arthur and Evelyn Preston began on a gray Tuesday in January. The courtroom was packed with reporters, society gossips, and former friends who'd come to watch the spectacle. I sat in the front row every single day. I wore a different designer outfit each time. The clothes they'd accused me of buying with stolen money, purchased legitimately from estate sales and consignment shops. I was the picture of the successful, independent woman they'd tried to destroy. The prosecution's case was devastating. Angela Morrison presented the evidence methodically, building a wall of guilt brick by brick. The forged signatures, the offshore accounts, the text messages planning my downfall, the photos of my mother practicing my handwriting, the emails to Harrison Sterling discussing how to frame me as their scapegoat, their public defender. A man named Tom Bradshaw, who looked perpetually exhausted, did his best, but there was no defense against the truth. On the witness stand, my father tried to maintain his dignity. He claimed the text messages were taken out of context. He insisted the offshore accounts were legitimate business structures. He said the forged signatures were authorized by verbal agreement. Angela Morrison destroyed him in cross-examination. Mr. Preston, you texted your accountant, and I quote, "The girl is too stupid to check the filings." Were those words taken out of context? I was frustrated. It was a private conversation. You called your daughter stupid and planned to frame her for tax evasion. Is that the action of a loving father? I never meant for any of this to happen. I just you needed a scapegoat. You needed someone to take the fall for your crimes. And you chose your own daughter. Yes or no, Mr. Preston? My father's jaw tightened. Yes. The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order. My mother was worse. She sobbed on the stand, insisting she'd been manipulated by Arthur, that she didn't understand what she was doing, that she just wanted to protect the family. Angela showed the jury the photograph of Evelyn at the dining room table, carefully tracing my signature with a light box, a stack of contracts beside her. She showed the text messages where Evelyn had suggested I benefit from the humility of prison. Mrs. Preston, does this look like the action of a confused woman? Or does it look like the action of someone who knew exactly what she was doing? My mother couldn't answer. She just cried. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Judge Holloway, who'd recused herself from the criminal trial but returned for sentencing, asked if I wanted to give a victim impact statement. I did. I stood at the podium, looking not at the judge, but at my parents. They sat at the defense table, diminished and defeated. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. My mother stared at me with something that looked like desperation. Your Honor, I began. My parents taught me from a very young age that everything has a price. Love has a price. Trust has a price. Even family has a price. They spent 24 years itemizing my worth, calculating my value, and finding me perpetually in debt. I pulled out a piece of paper, the original development contract from my 18th birthday. This is the contract my father made me sign before he'd pay for my education. 8% interest, compounded monthly. I paid every cent plus interest. I have the receipts. I pulled out another document. This is the invoice my father sent me for my upbringing costs. Food, clothing, shelter, all itemized, all billed. $167,000. I paid it. Every cent. I have the receipts. I pulled out a thick folder. These are the pay stubs from the 3 jobs I worked simultaneously while attending school full-time. These are the rent receipts for the basement apartment they charged me double market rate to rent. These are the bank statements showing the payments I made to the family fund, a fund that I later discovered didn't actually exist. It was just another way for them to extract money from me. I looked at my parents. I don't say these things to gain your sympathy, Your Honor. I say them to illustrate a simple truth. My parents didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as a revenue stream. And when I tried to leave, when I tried to be free, they tried to destroy me completely. I pulled out one final document, the text message from my mother. Prison will teach you the humility you lack. I read aloud. That's what my mother texted me when she served me with the lawsuit. She wasn't trying to collect a debt. She was trying to break me. And when breaking me wasn't enough, she tried to imprison me. I folded the paper and looked at Judge Holloway. My parents taught me that everything has a price. Today, Your Honor, I'm here to make sure they pay it. Every last cent. The courtroom was silent. My mother was crying. My father stared at the table, his jaw clenched so tight, I thought his teeth might crack. Judge Holloway looked at them for a long moment. Mr. and Mrs. Preston, she said, her voice like iron. In my 30 years on the bench, I have seen many crimes, but I have rarely seen such calculated cruelty, particularly directed at one's own child. You didn't just commit fraud and forgery. You committed a form of psychological torture that spanned decades. She consulted her notes. Mr. Preston, you are sentenced to 15 years in federal prison with the possibility of parole after 10. Mrs. Preston, you are sentenced to 10 years in federal prison with the possibility of parole after 7. You will both be required to pay full restitution to your daughter for all documented expenses, including the fraudulent upbringing costs and rent payments. You are also ordered to pay punitive damages in the amount of $1 million. My mother let out a wail. My father's face went white. Furthermore, Judge Holloway continued, You are both permanently barred from any contact with Clara Preston. No letters, no phone calls, no third-party messages. If you violate this order, you will serve the remainder of your sentences without possibility of parole. The gavel came down. Bailiffs removed the defendants. As they were led away in handcuffs, my father stopped and turned to me. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, he looked me in the eye. "I'm still your father, Clara," he said. "No matter what happens, you'll always be a Preston." I stood up, my voice carrying through the courtroom. "No, Arthur, I'm a self-made woman who survived you. You're just a convict I used to know. And as for the Preston name," I smiled. "I'm keeping it, because I'm the only real Preston left. You were just a squatter who got lucky." The bailiffs led him away. I walked out of that courtroom and into the rest of my life. 6 months passed. I sold the Preston Manor to a developer who wanted to turn it into a community center for at-risk youth. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I used part of the money to start the Eleanor Preston Foundation, a scholarship fund for children escaping abusive households. I used the rest to open a small art gallery in a coastal town 3 hours from Savannah. I didn't tell anyone who I was. I was just Clara, the woman who ran the gallery and painted seascapes. But the letters found me anyway. The first one came from my mother, forwarded through the foundation's legal address. It was 12 pages long, handwritten on prison stationery, filled with rambling apologies and requests for just a small loan to hire a better lawyer for appeals. I read the first page. Then I fed it into the shredder in my office. The confetti made excellent packing material for the art I shipped around the world. More letters came. Every week, sometimes twice a week. My mother wrote about her cellmates, about the terrible food, about how much she missed her beautiful home and her beautiful daughter. Each letter went into the shredder. Each shred went into my shipping materials. Even in her desperation, she was finally useful to me. Then, 2 years into their sentences, I received a different kind of letter. This one was from the warden of Lee Arundel State Prison, where my mother was incarcerated. "Dear Ms. Preston, I regret to inform you that your mother, Evelyn Preston, was involved in a physical altercation with another inmate. She suffered severe injuries and is currently in critical condition in the prison hospital. She has been asking for you." I sat with that letter for 3 days. I thought about the little girl whose braids were pulled too tight, the teenager who was charged for the electricity for her night light, the young woman who was framed for federal crimes. I thought about the text message. "Prison will teach you the humility you lack." On the 3rd day, I sent a response. "Dear Warden, please inform Evelyn Preston that I received your letter. I will not be visiting. However, I am sending a floral arrangement to the prison hospital. Please ensure she receives it. Sincerely, Clara Preston." The arrangement arrived 2 days later. Not roses or lilies. A bouquet of common garden weeds, dandelions, thistles, clover, and chickweed, arranged in a simple mason jar. The card read, "The weeds are thriving. Hope you find your roots." My mother died 4 days later. Her injuries, combined with stress and declining health, were too much for her system. I paid for a simple cremation. The ashes were sent to a storage facility. I never picked them up. I didn't attend any memorial service. There wasn't one. None of their society friends came forward to organize anything. In death, as in disgrace, the Prestons were alone. My father lasted longer, but not better. After my mother's death, he deteriorated rapidly. He tried to sue the prison system for inadequate protection. He tried to sue the state. He even tried to sue me for abandonment and emotional damages. Every case was dismissed before it reached a judge. He became a legend in the federal prison, the man who'd had everything and lost it to the daughter he'd called a weed. The other inmates had nicknames for him. The gardener, the trust fund fraud, Daddy Dearest. He got into fights. He spent months in solitary confinement. His health declined. Then, 3 years into his sentence, he had a massive stroke. It left him partially paralyzed and unable to speak. I heard about it from a victim's advocate who called to inform me of his condition. He's in the prison hospital, she said. The doctors say he may never recover his speech. He keeps trying to write something on his tray, but his hand doesn't work properly anymore. What's he trying to write? They think it's the word check. He just keeps making scratching motions, like he's trying to sign his name. I thanked her for calling and hung up. I imagine my father in that hospital bed, trapped in a body that wouldn't obey him, trying desperately to do the one thing that had defined his entire life: control resources, sign checks, move money. The bank was closed. The accounts were empty, and he couldn't even form the words to beg. I didn't visit him either. Arthur Preston died 6 months later, alone in a prison hospital bed. No family, no friends, no legacy except the cautionary tale of a man who destroyed his own daughter and was destroyed in return. I paid for his cremation. I took his ashes to the beach near my gallery and waited for the wind to pick up. I opened the urn and let the gray dust scatter into the ocean. It was beautiful, in a way, watching him dissolve into nothing, watching the sea claim him and pull him under. He had always wanted to be remembered, to build a legacy, to be someone important. Instead, he became sea foam. I turned my back on the water and walked home, where my life, my real life, was waiting. 5 years after the trial, I stood in the grand hall of the National Museum, surrounded by dignitaries, art critics, and philanthropists. The Weed Garden wing was opening to the public, a collection of rare European antiquities from my grandmother's trust, donated in her name. The curator had questioned the name at first. Why the Weed Garden? These are priceless historical treasures. Because I'd explained, it's a reminder that the things people try to pull out of the ground are often the ones with the deepest roots. Now, standing beneath the glass ceiling as afternoon light streamed through, I watched people marvel at Roman coins, medieval manuscripts, and Renaissance paintings. My grandmother had saved these treasures from the ravages of war. Now they would educate and inspire for generations. A woman approached me, early 40s, kind eyes, wearing a volunteer docent badge. "Are you Clara Preston?" she asked. "I am. I just wanted to thank you. I received the Eleanor Preston Scholarship 10 years ago. It helped me escape an abusive situation and get my degree. I became a teacher because of that opportunity." My throat tightened. "What do you teach?" "Art. To middle school students. I show them that there's beauty in the world, even when home is hard." I took her hand. "Thank you for doing that, for being that for them." She smiled and moved on. I watched her go, this woman I'd never met, whose life had been changed by my grandmother's vision and my commitment to breaking the cycle of abuse. That's when I saw him. A man stood in front of my favorite piece in the collection, a small oil painting of a garden overgrown with wildflowers. He was tall, dark-haired, with the kind of face that looked like it smiled often. "Beautiful, isn't it?" I said, coming to stand beside him. "It is," he agreed. "It's chaotic, but there's an order to it, like the artist knew exactly where each flower should go, even if it doesn't look planned." "My grandmother loved that painting," I said. "She told me once that gardens are at their most beautiful when you stop trying to control them." He turned to me, and his eyes, warm brown with flecks of gold, met mine. "You're Clara Preston," he said. It wasn't a question. "Guilty as charged." "Elias Moreno," he said, extending his hand. "I'm a lawyer. Civil rights, mostly. Whistleblower cases." I laughed. "Of course you are." We talked for hours about art, about justice, about what it means to rebuild a life after it's been burned to the ground. He'd read about my case. He knew who my parents were, what they'd done. And he didn't look at me with pity. He looked at me with respect. "You're probably the most dangerous person I've ever met," he joked as we walked through the exhibit. "Only if you try to pull my braids," I replied. He laughed, and in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not hope for revenge or justice, but hope for something simple and human. Hope for happiness. 3 years later, I stood in a park near the coast, watching my daughter, Elena, named for my grandmother, chase seagulls through the sand. She was 5 years old, bright-eyed, and fearless. She tripped and fell, skinning her knee on a piece of driftwood. I ran to her, scooping her up as she started to cry. "I'm sorry, Mommy," she sobbed. "I'm clumsy." I held her close, cleaning the scrape with fresh water from my bottle. "No, baby, you're not clumsy. You're brave. You're learning how to run, and sometimes learning means falling. That's okay. Do you know what you owe me for helping you?" She looked at me with wide eyes. "What?" "Nothing," I said, kissing her forehead. "You owe me nothing. Not now, not ever. I'm your mother. Taking care of you isn't a debt. It's a privilege." Elena threw her arms around my neck. "I love you, Mommy. I love you too, baby, more than anything in the world." Elias came up behind us, carrying Elena's shoes and a beach bag. He crouched down beside us. "Everyone okay?" he asked. "We're perfect," I said, and we were. That night, after Elena was asleep and Elias was reading on the couch, I went to my studio. I stood before a blank canvas and picked up my brush. I didn't paint the sea this time. I didn't paint the manor or the courtroom or any of the ghosts that had haunted me. I painted a single green shoot breaking through a slab of gray marble. Strong, vibrant, alive. I titled it The First Day, because that's what every day felt like now. The first day of a life I built myself. A life with deep roots and room to grow. A life where love wasn't measured in debt and family wasn't a prison. My parents had tried to burn me at the root. Instead, they'd fertilized the soil. I was no longer the weed in someone else's garden. I was the gardener now. And my garden was beautiful. There are two types of parents in this world. Those who plant gardens for their children to bloom in, and those who pull weeds to make themselves look taller. I was raised by the latter. But in the end, I learned that even weeds, when given the right conditions, can become forests. And forests don't burn. They regenerate. Stronger, wilder, more beautiful than anything that came before. If you've made it this far, you know the truth. Your worth isn't a debt to be repaid. My parents tried to use my silence as a cage and my loyalty as a weapon, but they forgot that a weed only grows stronger when you try to crush it. Respect is non-negotiable, and your value is never defined by a family that only sees you as a tool for their own greed. My journey proves that patience is power. If you've been gaslit into invisibility or framed by those who were supposed to protect you, remember this. Your boundaries don't make you difficult, and your survival makes you extraordinary. You are not a weed to be burned. You are the forest fire waiting to happen. Silence isn't weakness. It's the calm before the revolution. Subscribe and hit that notification bell to join me in turning humiliation into triumph. We are writing our own endings now, where our worth is remembered, not auctioned off. Have you ever had to prove your value to a family that underestimated you? Share your story in the comments below. Let's remind them exactly who we are.